welcome everybody. My name's Christian. I see a couple of new faces out there, so I'm excited to meet you. Hopefully, after the service, I'll get a chance to meet you. Hopefully, you'll meet some of the other awesome people in the room. So this is City Light. This is what you're experiencing. This is what we do, or at least some version of this, right? I'm telling you what, I just feel like my heart is just full this morning. I really just am grateful that we get to do this together. I don't know what just like hit me this morning. Like, I'm grateful we get to, like, we don't have like the best facilities or, whatever, the best acoustic guitarist. I'll just throw myself under the bus, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But like, I'm sure you could go online and easily find a better speaker right now, like literally probably hundreds of them. But at the same time, like what we have here is just, I love it. I love what we have here. I love the people that make up City Light. And I was just sitting here while my dad was doing announcements and just looking at just like every family that's out there, and families that are online that I can't see, but I know you're there. And my heart is full. Like, God is doing something beautiful here in Newark, Elkton, Avon Grove, through City Light, in City Light. And some of you have been with us since the beginning. Some are fairly new or very new. And just, I hope everyone just feels that. Like we're in a good trajectory together with the Lord. I'm just excited about it. So, show up different. We've been in this series for quite a while, and we are nearing the finish line. So today is the second to last. And what we're doing, if you haven't been here, is we're going through what the Bible calls the fruit of the Spirit. So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. For those of you who are keeping score, we did gentleness out of order on purpose. So there's just self-control left after this. So today we're talking about faithfulness, and we've been talking about how we can show up, how we can be present in our families, in our workplaces, in school, in whatever circles that you find yourself in. How can we show up different than how the world around us shows up? How can we show up different than an anxious world or a hurried world or a fighting, divisive world? How can we show up different with love and joy and faithfulness? And one of the things my dad said, so that was my dad up here before, and then that was my dad on the video. We're really highlighting my dad today. So, hey, and Brad, come back up on, no. One of the things he said that just stuck out to me is he said, faithfulness is when you say you're going to stay, that you stay. And like, I was interviewing everybody for this long video series that we've done. I was the interviewer on the other side of the camera. And when he said that, for me, because I grew up in his household, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I understood that the weight of his words. Like another person could say, oh, I think faithfulness is when you say you're going to stay, you stay. And that'd be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cognitive. I get that intellectually, makes sense. But when my dad said it, I told Mandy when I got home, it was like it immediately was fighting back tears, and I was feeling like the weight of like, because my dad, you have to understand, and my dad shared his story. If you haven't heard it, he shared it during the mental health series that we did back at the theater. So you can go back online and listen to that. It's really powerful. His testimony was really powerful, I thought. And so, but part of his testimony is that just a couple years after getting married to my mom, she was diagnosed with lupus. And that began a 30-plus year journey of her medical, her health, not her health, like constantly deteriorating. And my childhood, I remember growing up in it was a roller coaster. And there would be times where things were a little bit better, and then there would just be like times that were like rushes to the emergency room, months living at Johns Hopkins at the hospital, months in bed, wheelchairs, canes, walkers, other stuff that, We have lots of family war stories that we like to tell at the holidays. Our holiday dinners are not what your typical family holiday dinner. We tend to talk about like gross things that happened in our childhood, but it's all, then we laugh about it. So when my mom was alive, she passed away 7 years ago, but I feel like she really loved that part of holiday dinners, right? Don't you, Dad? When we told war stories of mom, some of which she couldn't remember, so that was even funnier. We really do, we joke about it. Because have you ever been through a lot of hard times in your life? If you don't joke about it, it kills you, right? So I have like a lot of gallows humor in my life, and like for people who just meet me, sometimes I'll make a joke and I'm like, wait a second, it's okay, you need to know that I'm not like, a terrible person. But my dad, he stayed. Like, he told her when they got married, and he wasn't even a believer when they got married. He told her that he would stay, come sickness or health. And I watched my whole life growing up, I watched him stay. And it wasn't easy, and he wasn't perfect. Like, I don't want to paint this picture that he's perfect, because he's not. I've told you lots of things bad about him during my teaching. But he stayed physically, he stayed emotionally, right? He stayed intellectually, he stayed plugged in. He didn't just like come home from work and check out because it was too stressful. He didn't spend lots of night out with the guys because home was too stressful. I mean, if anything, he curtailed his life constantly to stay. And I grew up seeing a picture of faithfulness that I would never forget and I would always hope to live up to. There is something about when we are committed, when we say what we mean, and we mean what we say, when we do what we commit to, there's something deep. What I would say is, like, if I could draw a picture of this whole thing, fruit of the Spirit, for me, faithfulness is like underground. It's like, some fruit, I don't know if this is really true, because they're probably vegetables, but don't some things grow underground? Potatoes? They grow underground, right? Are they a fruit? Okay, so the fruit and vegetables of the Spirit. But faithfulness is it's not the sexiest of the fruits, okay? It's not the flashiest. It's not like, wow, that guy's so faithful, that girl's so faithful. Like, we love it when we see people who are loving, right? Who are joyful, who are kind. Like, it's easy to see those kindness, those actions of kindness. But faithfulness is so boring. It's so mundane. In fact, you can't take a snapshot picture of faithfulness. You can't say like, I see faithfulness right there. You can't. You have to step back and you have to take a long-term perspective. And after a few years, you can probably say, I see some faithfulness there. See, faithfulness is something that happens over the long haul. And what's really interesting is you've all seen it in your life with somebody. Think about who it is in your life that you've seen faithfulness in. Who have you watched it? Who's been faithful to you? And what the other side of that coin is, we've all had people be unfaithful to us, haven't we? We've all had friends who have broken their commitments to us. We've all had friends who, I would say probably most of us, if you've lived long enough, you've had a friend betray you. You've had somebody not just like not fulfill their word, but actually go do the opposite of what they said they would do. You've had people leave you and disappoint you. Some of us in this room have had parents be unfaithful to their job of raising you. They've walked out on you, maybe. They've walked away from you. They've left emotionally. Some of us have had spouses in multiple ways do this. And when we really get down to it, if we want to be honest, we've all been unfaithful too, It's so much easier to find the lack of fruit in other people's lives, isn't it? It's so much harder to be honest with ourselves. But we've all been unfaithful, haven't we? We've all. I'll tell you, here's one of the ways that I see unfaithfulness in my heart is I am one of those out of sight, out of mind people. And so when people leave our church and God moves them on to another church, it is really hard for me to stay engaged or invested with them in any way. It is, and so don't leave. There you go. I'm manipulating you emotionally. If you don't understand that, you can go to Christine's class afterwards and she'll help you deal with it, okay? But no, seriously, I just struggle. I have all the intentions, right? Have you ever had that? I have good intentions to stay a friend with people, but my life, I have all the excuses too. Here's all the excuses. My life is really full, blah, 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 okay? The fact of the matter is I'm just not very faithful when people move on. There's nothing wrong with moving on. There's nothing wrong with God moving you on to some other place. In fact, God's usually in that, but I just can't, I'm not good at maintaining that. Where do you see unfaithfulness in your life? We've all seen both sides of that coin, right? So how do we grow in faithfulness? I want to be a person. I want it to be said at the end of my life, this is one of my goals, is that I was faithful. I want it to be said that I was faithful to God, to the call of God on my life, that I was faithfully walked it out. I'm going to say this quote a couple times today, but it's one of my favorite quotes. Eugene Peterson, he's the guy who translated the Bible into the Message version. There's a beautiful story behind that that you should look up someday. But he is a pastor and an author, and he said discipleship is a long obedience in the same direction. And I just get this picture of faithfulness of just like walking. Like walking. Walking is so boring, isn't it? Right? I would much rather do almost anything other than walk. I would rather run somewhere or preferably get in a car and go somewhere. But walking is so just like, it's the most basic thing we do as humans. But like, that is faithfulness. It's just walking. It's just one foot in front of the other, the next step of obedience towards God. I don't ever want to do this and chase something else. I don't want to have a short-term obedience in the right direction. I don't want to have a long-term obedience in the wrong direction. I want to have a life that is a long obedience in the same direction, that I'm heading towards Jesus, and I'm heading towards people, loving my wife well, loving my kids well, loving the church well, in that order. That I will have in my life, my affections, my priorities lined up. So how do I show up as a faithful person in a culture where, you know, I don't want to bash culture, but do you see some unfaithfulness? Like when we look around, do you see some unfaithfulness? And could the church change our testimony of faithfulness? Has the church been faithful? Have we been faithful to those who are hurting? Have we been faithful to those who don't fit in? Have we been faithful to the call of God in our life? Have we been faithful to what we've preached? It's interesting to think about. But it starts with Jesus, doesn't it? Like we can't just go out on our own, and this is the whole thing we keep talking about, fruit of the Spirit. It's this marriage between the Holy Spirit's deep work in our hearts and our willingness to say yes to it, right? There's always this partnership between God's work and our partnership with him. But it starts with knowing a God who is faithful. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is the unchanging one. Everything that God says is true and comes to pass. God cannot lie. He cannot break a promise. He cannot leave you. He cannot let you down. God has said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. God is the God from before time. I mean, this is part of why, like, if you're an Old Testament person, they would often refer to him as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of your fathers, the God of the generations. He's a God who says that I am the faithful God, and I visit kindness upon generation to 1,000 generations. Forgiveness to 1,000 generations. That's hyperbole. He is the faithful one. That's why the psalmist will sing and write poems about God's faithfulness being higher than the heavens. It's because you can't capture his faithfulness. And this is who God is. And so, like today, some people in this room, the teaching needs to be over. And this is all you need to hear. And then you can walk away. I mean, don't really, because it'd be awkward. But like, you can get on your phone if you want to. So this is what you came here to hear today. God wanted to tell you that he is there for you. And he just wanted to, I think some people needed to hear, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Jesus is going to be faithful to you. That as your life goes down and up, as you hit the valleys and the mountains of life, as you hit the questions of life, as you come out of, you know, for some of you who are younger, young adults, like as you come out of like some of the sheltering of your first 20 years of life and into what's pretty scary, the next 80 years of your life. Well, that's really generous. 70? We'll give you 70. Okay. You know, like, he is going to be faithful. The same God who walked with you in your childhood is going to walk with you in your adulthood. The same God who you've seen walk with people that you respect in the faith is walking with you. There isn't some, like, second-rate God that you have. God is faithful to you. And here's what's amazing, because you might be sitting there saying, Christian, you don't know what I've done. Christian, you don't know how I've broken my words to God, how I've broken my words to my family, how I've broken my promises. You don't know the sin that's in my heart. And God would say that even if we are faithless, he remains faithful. So listen, you can take this to the bank. And if this is what you need to hear today, is that God is faithfully loving you, faithfully for you, faithfully on your side. And, you know, let's just pause. You might even be here today and not know Jesus personally. Right? You might have been raised in a Christian home, but you haven't made that personal decision. Or maybe you're invited by a friend here today. Maybe you're watching online because someone told you about it, or you got our mailer in the mail about Easter or about the bunny hunt. And so you're checking us out, and you're like, I don't know about this whole Jesus thing. And so, like, let's just pause real quick, because if you are here today or if you're watching online and you've never said, I want to give my life to God. I want to figure out what it means to become a follower of Jesus, what Jesus would have called a disciple, which is like someone who says, I will follow you everywhere that you go, Jesus. If you haven't known the life-changing love of God in your heart, today could be a day for you to do that. Because he is on your side. And he's known you since before you were born. And if you look at your life through the lens of faith, you'll see the fingerprints of God all over your life. The good times and the bad times. You'll see how he's held you in the brokenness, how he's supported you when you failed. And so I want to just say that there's a faithful God who's constantly wanting to reveal his faithfulness to us. And if we've been walking with God for a long time, he still is revealing that faithfulness to us, isn't he? Every day, if we can notice the faithfulness of God. And it's out of that faithfulness. So when we're done today, we're going to offer a chance for you to pray with someone if you'd like to begin a journey of following Jesus. So just remember, in case I forget. Okay, so God is faithful. I love this quote. I believe this is also from Eugene Peterson, okay? From the book, Long Obedience in the Same Direction. God sticks to his relationship. Isn't that good? Don't you want to hear that? God sticks to his relationship. He is sticking by your side. He establishes a personal relationship with us and stays with it. He stays. Faithfulness is staying. The central reality for Christians is the personal, unalterable, persevering commitment that, look at this. Wouldn't most people define it? Wouldn't you think that would say the personal, unalterable, preserving commitment that we make to God? But it's the commitment that God makes to us. Perseverance is not the result. So our perseverance, okay, in faith, is not the result of our determination. It's the result of God's faithfulness. As God is faithful to us, we become faithful to him and others. We survive in the way of faith, not because we have extraordinary stamina, but because God is righteous and because God sticks with us. Amen. Right? God sticks with you. And from that, then we can become faithful people. We can learn to be faithful. See, God calls us to walk in the same way, to be faithful as he is faithful. And Jesus tells this really cool story of this guy who goes away and gives some of his gold to some of his servants. All right, so some of you have heard this 1,000 times, but it might be new for some of you. Let's read it. Jesus said, again, the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. So to one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. And then he went on his journey. And the man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work. Okay? He put his money to work. He was faithful with what God had given him. Okay, so skip down to here. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5, and he said, Master, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things, and I'll put you in charge of many. So Jesus is the faithful one. He never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He promises to stick by your side. And he calls you and I to live lives of faithfulness. And he entrusts each of us, doesn't he? What has God entrusted to your care? Let's just think about like your friends. What friends has God entrusted to your care? Think about, if you were to come before God, have you invested in your friends the way that the way that God has invested in you? Have you been faithful to your friends the way that God has been faithful to you? What about your work, your career, your vocation? Like, have you been faithful to what God has given you to do, the work of your hands, the way God has been faithful to you? Have you been faithful in your marriage? And I'm not just talking about adultery. That's obviously like the most obvious layer, but like, have you been faithful with your time? Have you been faithful with your heart? Have you been faithful with your affection in your marriage, the way God has been faithful to you? Have you been faithful to your kids? You know, I was at a retreat for young people years and years and years ago, and I was praying with this one young teenager, and she told me, she was like really sad and crying and stuff, and she told me that, I was like, what's going on, you know? And she said that she had a father who was in ministry. And her whole childhood, he would promise to come home in time to put her to bed. And so this is from her perspective, and I know that this probably isn't wholly true, but it definitely impacted me. She said, but he never did. There's no way he never did. But that's how it felt to her. Somehow routinely, this person would promise to be there and not be there. And you know how it is, don't you? You're at work, you're at a night meeting, things go long. Work doesn't always fit into our schedules, right? And so, but this person had just routinely not been there, routinely broken his word. And so even if he had said no, I won't be there tonight, I think that would have been different. But saying I will be there, I promise, and then not being there had done some damage to this girl's heart. And I just thought, man, I don't ever want to be that guy. As a pastor, I'm going to have the same issue. I'm going to have night meetings 3-4 times a week. I'm going to have issues. I'm going to have emergencies. I'm going to have crises. I'm going to have, pastors are like other professions. You're kind of on call, right? So you have things that come up that are unexpected. How am I going to build boundaries around my life so that I can be faithful and my kids can experience me as faithful, so that when they're the age that they are now, they can know a faithful presence of their father in their life the way God has been faithful to me. That's part of who I want to be, because God's entrusted those kids to me, right? First and foremost, above even the church, God's entrusted my family. And so I need to show up faithful. What has God entrusted to you guys? Think about it. What has God entrusted to you? And there's 3 things that I find in my life, see if you resonate with this, that get in the way of being a faithful person, okay? So what we're going to talk about for the rest of the time, I kind of already alluded to this, is that faithfulness is taking one step of obedience over and over and over again. It's like that, some Disney movie, right? Do the next right thing. I don't know what Disney movie it is. But, anybody know? Frozen 2? Oh, I really stepped in that one. Okay. I have issues with Frozen as well, but that one's good. It doesn't, I don't love the whole do it my way. But anyway, so that whole song from Frozen 1 really grates on my nerves. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. No rules, no right, it's all good for me. It's yeah, good. Thanks a lot for teaching my kids they don't have to obey me ever again. They're singing. Okay, anyway. Faithfulness is taking one step of obedience at a time. It's saying in the moment, yes to what God is calling you to, what's the right thing. Now, last week, I think these all connect, right? Goodness is doing what is good, what is morally right. We talked about truth and how there is right and wrong. There is truth and untruth. And so we step into that. Faithfulness is one step at a time. And this is what I'm trying to get across. It's not obvious. It's long term. It's underneath the ground. It's like a spy movie. You're like a really good spy. You're living behind the scenes, but then later in life, people are like, oh, he's been faithful the whole time. She's been faithful. I didn't know it, but you have been. So here's the 3 things that I think get in the way of being faithful. And number 1 is greener grass, or what I often call the greener grass syndrome, okay? It's the idea that something else is better. And we do this all the time. We think that other job is going to be better, that other wife or husband is going to be better. I don't think anyone ever thinks that other kid's going to be. Maybe you think someone else's kids are better, but you're probably not going to try to swap them, But that whole greener, maybe if they would agree to it, you'd be open to it. But the whole greener grass, and I want to say okay, sometimes in life the grass is greener, but let's agree 80% of the time the grass is not greener, okay? 80% of the time you get there, it's just going to have other issues. Right? It might look a little bit different. It might be a different kind of problem, but part of the problem is you're going to go. Just FYI, we're always like that. It's going to be better over there, and then we show up and you're like, oh crap, I brought all my stuff with me, right? So that's anyway. But with this greener grass, it's no, we need to be people who invest through the times when it doesn't feel like everything's going right. Faithfulness is not always saying yes when everything's easy and going right. And see, this is the greener grass thing. Faithfulness goes against our addiction. Each one of these lines up with an addiction. For me, it's an addiction to new. It's an addiction to trying new things or hearing new things. And so it's like when you're given a task to do by God, okay, and you start something, and you get a couple weeks into it, or a couple months into it, or a couple years into it, and it's like you get that initial high and things are going well, and then everything you start in life, even if it's not for God, it could be at work, You've all experienced this, right? You start something, there's all this initial energy in it, and then it's like, now I just have to stick with it, right? It's like this, and then it's the hopefully slow build over time, but it just takes like work. If you've ever started anything, a nonprofit, or even like raising kids, there's all this excitement at the beginning, and then you're like, oh, now we just have a kid for the rest of our lives. I mean, not really, that's not what you think. But like in some ends, it's not like, you can't just be faithful for the first 24 hours. Like all of a sudden now you have to just like continue, right? Like I do actually think that with kids, some parents get greener grass syndrome. And you know what the greener grass is? Leaving the family. I wish I hadn't had kids. I wish I wasn't stuck in this situation. Right? Like just going back to my dad, don't you think there were times when he was like, that person's marriage looks easier? Yes, like greener grass. And that is a temptation that pulls us out of being people of faithfulness. But faithfulness is just taking one step at a time, over and over and over again. The next thing is pain. Anytime that we do anything worth doing, we're gonna hit pain. Anytime that we are faithful, it's gonna be walking through pain. And this is our addiction to comfort that this battles. But in any relationship, in any friendship, right? You have a friendship right now. In any friendship, you're gonna continue to get closer. Eventually, you're gonna hurt each other's feelings. Eventually, you're gonna let each other down. Eventually, one of you is gonna say something stupid, and you're gonna have to walk through pain together. If you're married, this is not a shocker, right? This isn't news, but you're gonna have to walk through pain together. When I do premarital counseling with young couples, I often tell them, I find that divorces happen when one or both stop being willing to do the work. If both are still willing to do the work, usually they can work it out. But if one stops, if one's like, I can't go through this pain anymore, then it's done. And they just don't keep going. And they just give up. And that's really when we become unfaithful, when we check out because we don't want the pain anymore. And I'm not saying that, I get it, that's hard. It's hard to walk through pain. It's hard to say, I will stay with you through your illness. I will stay with you through your brokenness that is evidenced in you having a foul temper, or you being trained by your mom that she'll do all your laundry and pick it up off the floor. That's not me. I'm just saying. I'll stay with you, I've experienced faithfulness in my life through Mandy, because Mandy and I have been through pain together. We've been through pain in our marriage, together pain, and we've been through pain against each other pain. I have let Mandy down a few times this morning. On the way here. No, so I have broken Mandy's trust. When we were first married, I was not good at communicating. And I did not have a great control over my anger. And so she grew up wanting, when she got married, for there not to be tension or fighting. And this thing that she always says to me, which I love when she says it when we're having a discussion, is lower your voice, okay? Because my really competitive arguing voice is considered screaming my head off by her. So we just have different levels of acceptability. And so I have to talk like this. And then she's like, don't talk so quiet like that. Sounds like you're really angry. And I'm like, okay, is this a good volume right here? Just... Isn't it so nice that I have the mic and you don't? But I really, I had this thing where if I couldn't convince her or control her, I would just lash out. I would yell. I would throw things, not at anyone. I'm just being real honest here. But I have an anger, a rage problem, lose control, and I've broken things, and it just feels so good, doesn't it? You don't have to say yes to that, but some of you are like, yeah. When you're really angry, when you really can't get them to see your point of view, when it feels like, you're just and she had to walk with that. She could have left, right? I mean, she could have given up on me. She could have exited emotionally, but she not only didn't leave me, but she stayed with me emotionally. She stayed close to me. Even as I hurt her through forgiveness, she stayed emotionally vulnerable with me. And I've seen what faithfulness looks like after 24 years. She thinks it's 25, just can't do math. So 24 years of her just taking one step at a time, getting up every morning and saying, I'm going to love you today. Getting up every morning and saying, I'm going to love you today. We can all embody that, but I'm just telling you, in any situation, if it's in your work environment, If it's at school, you're going to hit obstacles. You're going to hit disappointment, and it's going to be you choosing to walk through the pain. It's like being like walking over hot coals. Like you have to get across it. You have to there will be times in your life where to be a person of faithfulness, you have to say, I just have to step on this. I just have to step in this. And I'm just going to keep going. And this sucks, and this hurts, and it's painful, and it's disappointing, and I wish it wasn't this way, but I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to bail. I'm not going to be someone who exits. And the third one is the waiting for fruit to grow. Man, I can tell you, I was a youth pastor for most of my life, and youth ministry is really difficult because you're investing so much into young people, but like, you don't know anything about how their life's going to turn out. You get like 3 or 4 years with them, and then they leave. So it's really hard. And you're just hoping, praying something stuck. Worship team, come on up. So I love working with teenagers because I love the energy that they bring, and I love the perspective that they bring, and I love how honest and authentic they are. And I love that they're moldable, and that they're not willing to disagree with you. But it's scary. I've done youth ministry long enough that I know adults who were in my youth group, and they have kids who are in my youth group. So I don't run youth group anymore, just for the record. I just go to it for fun. But I'm old, okay? And watching people grow in faith is just like so beautiful. But like I feel like it's been 15, 20 years, right? Like you plant a seed, and it's not like it grows up in the fall. It's like it grows up in the next decade. And it just takes faithfulness. The thing that I know to be true is so much of the impact we're making on the people around us is not what we say, but it's who we are. And that's the thing that I think this world is missing, is people who stay the same. People who remain faithful. I'm not saying don't change and get better. You understand? Change and get better. But I'm saying we stay the same. We are who we say we are. I'm a follower of Jesus. I believe in integrity. I believe in love. I believe in sacrifice. I believe in authenticity. And that is who I am. And if you check back in on me in 5 years, that's who I will be. And in 10 years, that's who I will be. Mandy and I got this email this one time from someone, and they were really actually angry at us because we hadn't changed with the times. And they had known us like 15 years ago, and then they had kind of come across this again, and they had hoped that maybe our commitment to the Word of God had like loosened up. And they were disappointed to find out that it hadn't. And it was an angry email, and it was one I will never forget. Because Mandy and I looked at each other, and as we processed it, we were like, cool. And Mandy wrote back, and it was beautiful, and she said, that should give you comfort. And when you come back in 10 years, we're still going to be the same. And our arms will be wide open. Because we're going to be following Jesus one step at a time. One step of obedience after another. One step of obedience after another. And I want to be that. I want to be that in my friends' lives. I want to be that in your lives. I want to be that in my wife's life, my kids' lives. Don't you? Don't you think that would be a great testimony to your friends and neighbors and coworkers to be a person of faithfulness? Wouldn't that go over really well in your kids' lives, especially those of us who have little kids, if you just were the rock